They say that a friend in need is a friend indeed. A rather cynical statement, if you ask me, and know its true meaning. Personally, I feel friends are very valuable, and they can be the difference between life and death, which is what our story is about tonight. It is a tale known as The Follower.
Darrell slid 3/4 into the vending machine and weighed his options. The coins were the last of the money he had on him. Moving had been a gamble, but at least he knew someone here. He could probably get a motel with a credit card or such things. Maybe his old friend would have pity on him. He cursed under his breath. Those were really his only options. He thought if he had moved, it would stop following him. Now he was stuck in this small town, where he knew a whole one person, assuming they still lived here at all. All the while, that thing seemed more interested in him than ever. All he wanted was to be left alone. He knew as soon as he turned his head, it would be there. He never saw it clearly. His attempts to get a view of it had always failed. Pictures were blurred, other people made it duck away. It never tried to hurt him, as far as he knew. It had always just been following him, for roughly 10 years now. At first, it was easy to deny. A misplaced object or a door that was surprisingly unlocked. Then it started to occupy dark corners and doorways. It was roughly humanoid-shaped, though hulking. It always ducked out of his vision as quickly as it appeared. But Darrell knew that it was tall and wide. It never made a sound, but in a strange way, he could almost feel an emotional feedback from it, knowing how it felt at some times. After a few years, he tried to get rid of it. He yelled at it, even threatened an exorcism. This only upset it, though. His sleep was plagued by sudden starts. Forgotten yet terrible nightmares left him trembling in his bed like a child. Only after he told the thing that it could stay was he able to sleep again at all. He tried speaking to it, asking questions, but the thing seemed to be confused by this. Only once did he ever get a clear response at all. He asked it out loud if it had a name. The next morning, he woke to find his spice rack completely spilled on the floor. After that, he took to referring to the creature as Spice. He reached down and took the soda can from the machine, muttering under his breath, attempting to mock Spice, assuring it that it wasn't going to startle him this time. He quickly turned around, ready to see the shape vanish. But what he saw was a man holding a large black pipe in his hands. The man was dressed in dirty, ragged clothes, with a blank, almost dazed look in his eyes. He grunted a low, "Money." His grip on his pipe tightened enough that his knuckles popped, and all around him hung a stale odor of alcohol as he slightly tipped to one side. Darrell looked around, but there was no one else in view. They were in front of a local retail store, well past sundown. All he could think was to run and hope his feet could carry him to the safety of public view. With no warning, he turned and ran. Immediately, he could hear the man's footsteps following him. No matter what, it seemed as if his life was to be spent being pursued by others. Without thinking of a next step, Darrell quickly turned around on the corner of a building. That was when he felt a sharp pain jolt in his leg. His ankle twisted underneath him, and he crashed to the ground. He rolled onto his back to face his attacker, but only saw the man standing at the edge of the building, his jaw hanging open wide, his eyes fixed high above Darrell. At once, he realized he could feel that uncomfortable presence. He asked the man, "It's behind me, isn't it?" The man never answered Daryl, as a huge black mass pounced upon him and tackled him to the ground. Daryl looked away while trying to get back to his feet. It didn't help, though. He could hear the sound of bones breaking and screams being choked by gargling blood. Daryl leaned against the wall and finally looked at the scene that was playing out in front of him. For the first time, he could clearly see Spice. He had been right to assume its size, perhaps 10 feet, almost 6 feet wide. It was humanoid, with long, thick arms and legs covered in fine black fur. Or maybe it was really made out of shadow. The whole body was pitch black. Its head was something like a dog, but twisted upside down. It was hard to look directly at. He couldn't focus on it for the mangled, bloody mass of human that was hanging from its mouth. Even with gore hanging from its jaws, the thing had a strange, disgusting sort of playfulness to it. Its head tilted, like it was curious to see his reaction. Daryl took a painful step away, pulling at his hair. Ignoring the pain in his foot, he finally was able to turn and run away. All he could think was that he had to find his friend. Last he heard, she was living here. He prayed that she still was. Spice watched Daryl run away. Then it let out a low rumbling and slowly walked after him, still chewing on the would-be mugger. Blood trickled down from its mouth. It couldn't wait to find out what a friend was. Meanwhile, Lena had been raised on violin lessons and minimal parental supervision. This gave her a strong sense of not needing anyone else, which is why she moved to this small town. She told herself she liked not knowing anyone. No need to meet up or call anyone. Still, though, tonight she felt uneasy in her apartment, so much so that she jumped when she heard frantic knocking at the door. Daryl had known her in school. Recently, he started talking to her again, and even mentioned wanting to meet her again. She didn't expect him so suddenly, but there he was, standing at her door. She asked him to come inside, but he asked if they could stay out in the open. So they walked around the building. Daryl was clearly troubled. Lena had never seen someone look so pale. He honestly looked like he was about to throw up, or drop dead. She wasn't sure which one would honestly be worse to see. No matter how poor his health was, though, he refused to stop, or go inside her apartment. Lena also noticed how he kept looking over his shoulder and stuttering any time she tried to ask him a question. She had to admit the night did seem more dreadful than normal. Even her simple apartment complex had an air of malice to it. A modest building, only 3 floors, made of red and light orange bricks. A clock tower rose up in the northeast corner of the building. Daryl was trying to put words together explaining why he had so suddenly come to see her. But Lena only heard every other word. She kept getting distracted by quick movement in the dark spaces. His words finally got her attention when she heard him say, "I never would have asked it to kill, though." Lena looked at Daryl and saw fear in his eyes. He grabbed her shoulder. He begged her to believe him. She pulled away and told him to get a hold of himself. Daryl just stared, trembling and sweating. It dawned on her that he wasn't actually looking at her. He was looking past her. Slowly, Lena turned around. She staggered back, falling to the floor, with her mouth hanging open. It was almost like she was so frightened her scream wouldn't come out of her mouth. The thing looked close to being as tall as 2 people, covered in pitch-black skin or fur, with a thick, dark substance trickling down from its twisted, elongated mouth. It rose one of its huge arms forward, and Lena finally found enough courage to turn and run. Daryl shouted at her, but fear and panic made it impossible to hear clearly. She just ran until her feet wouldn't carry her. She looked back once, and tumbled into a bush. She wildly thrashed, trying to get free of the plant, only for a sudden pull to jerk her loose. Laying on the ground, she found herself staring into the beady eyes of the creature. Daryl ran up and managed to put himself between her and Spice, weakly explaining its name and it was why he had come there. He thought maybe it wouldn't follow him, but now it had killed someone. Lena slowly got to her feet, flinching as she felt a snail sliming its way up her leg. She kicked out her leg and sent the small pest flying towards Spice. The huge beast, oddly, gently even, picked up the snail and sniffed it. Daryl tried to explain to her how the thing had been following him for the past decade, how it never showed itself before now, and how for the first time that he clearly saw it, it attacked someone that was trying to rob him. Lena couldn't take her eyes off the thing, but finally she told Daryl that they should go to her apartment. Daryl agreed while Spice placed the snail back in the bush, as if it wasn't even aware of their conversation to begin with. Back in Lena's apartment, Daryl quickly closed the door behind him. Lena asked if it was a good idea to leave that creature outside. Daryl just sighed and turned around. Spice tilted its head, standing in Lena's kitchen. He warned her in advance that the creature seemed to like spices. Daryl sounded utterly defeated, as if this was something that he had unfortunately experienced before. Lena, meanwhile, was content to let the thing have whatever it wanted in the kitchen, assuming that it didn't destroy her apartment or kill her. Spice simply stared at her for a moment. Then its mouth opened, and a large pile of gore and bone gushed onto the floor. Daryl had to fight back the urge to vomit, while Lena could only stare, finally finding the courage to ask if that was what was left of the mugger. Spice, meanwhile, looked on almost oblivious to the whole weight of the situation. Lena didn't like calling a bloody spill on her floor a body, but in a weird way, denying that it had been a person only made it worse. Daryl pointed out that they needed to clean it up before it actually leaked into the floor. They nodded to each other, and Lena pulled a roll of black trash bags out from underneath the sink. Together, her and Daryl started gathering up the mess into the bags. But even the slightest touch made their flesh crawl. The sound of the fleshy pulp also made them feel weak. Surprisingly, Spice stepped in and started picking up huge handfuls and dropping them into the bag. Daryl wasn't sure it would understand, but he managed to choke out a raspy thank you. He watched Spice for a moment. The creature had never tried to harm him. In fact, it spent most of the past 10 years hiding from him, just to suddenly jump out of the shadows and save his life. Slowly, he reached his hand out, and for the first time, he touched the thing that he had named Spice. Its body felt like a thick shag carpet, but he could also feel powerful muscles underneath it flinch at his touch. Spice turned its head and looked at him. At least, he thought it looked at him. The head was rather difficult to make eye contact with. For a second, the two just faced each other. Then the monster reached up with one single digit and softly tapped the end of Daryl's nose. Lena pointed out that no matter what the thing did, it would never look cute. It literally vomited a person up onto her floors, after all. Daryl wiped away the blood from his nose. He held his breath and went back to helping Spice gather up the flesh and bones. The entire ordeal lasted well over an hour, and left them with 3 large filled sacks to take care of. In his mind, Daryl was becoming less and less comfortable with the idea that Spice was starting to remind him of a dog. He didn't want to think of Spice as something normal. It was a hulking, human-eating, or at least chewing, monster. It should be unsettling. It should not be normal, and it should not be regarded the same way one would regard a dog. It was a nightmare. And worse yet, It was a murderous one. But still, it helped him. And it had been so common in his life the past 10 years. Furthermore, somewhere in the back of his mind, Daryl couldn't help but wonder, if Spice really was dangerous, murderous even, or a monster, why did it never show any aggression to Lena? Or to him? Lena, meanwhile, was mopping up the floor and searching on her phone. She claimed that she found a landfill that was open this late at night. Her idea was to just dump the body. Then she realized, what if it could be traced back to them? Lena paced around the room, muttering off random ideas, as if there was some clear path to deal with disposing of a human body. Daryl noticed that Spice oddly seemed to be nodding or shaking its head, sometimes even rubbing the underside, or perhaps the top, of its inverted head. He couldn't help but laugh. Spice, for whatever intelligence it had, was trying to be part of a conversation, imitating the human gestures. He wasn't sure if the creature was trying to mock Lena, or if it was genuinely trying to help. That was when Lena suddenly had a thought. There was a river not far from here. Throw the bags into the water, and any evidence connecting them should be washed away, right? There was really no better idea, so they put the bags into the trunk of Lena's car. She looked up at Spice, and then back to Daryl in confusion. Daryl just shrugged, saying, "Spice will catch up. They always do." They didn't speak to each other as they drove. They wanted to make sure that they were far enough away that if the bags were discovered, they wouldn't be tied back to them. They drove in silence for 2 hours, before finally Lena pulled over to the side of the road. Daryl took a deep breath as he looked upon the river in the shining headlights. They got out of the car, and sure enough, there was Spice, standing by the trunk. The creature waved at them. Lena pointed out that you will never be anything other than terrifying, Spice. Daryl didn't nod immediately. He honestly found it somewhat amusing. He wondered if Spice had the mental capacity to try and be cute or friendly. In any case, Lena opened up the trunk, and Spice picked up the bags. It sniffed them, then looked at the two humans. Daryl pointed to the river. Spice didn't understand this game, but, to be fair, Daryl had always been very entertaining, so why not play along? Spice heaved the bags with one swift motion, sending them flying into the river and drifting away. Then it looked back to Daryl and Lena. They probably couldn't tell, but Spice was smiling. It couldn't wait to find out what the next phase of this silly little game was. They returned to Lena's apartment, and sat there wondering if they had made the right decision. Lena had said that Daryl could stay at her apartment, partly because she didn't want to be alone, and partly because she was afraid of offending Spice. Neither of them could fully understand why the creature would suddenly attack a person, but Lena wasn't willing to gamble with any actions that could cause the creature to become upset. Spice, meanwhile, was keeping out of sight. Daryl knew it was watching them. It was always watching him, at least. And now he had pulled Lena into this whole mess. Part of him wanted to call the creature out of the shadows, to see it again. At least then he wouldn't have to worry about it bumping into him or jumping out from a corner. Though he was pretty certain that Lena probably was much happier not seeing its hulking frame again. More to the point, Spice had never been one to just do what it was told. Honestly, Daryl was surprised the thing seemed to be cooperative enough to throw the bags into the river. Lena, meanwhile, was becoming more and more interesting to Spice, while it watched them from the dark corner, trying to understand their strange behaviors. This was Lena's den, wasn't it? This is where one should be most comfortable. But they seemed all the more bothered. These creatures, these humans, were so fascinating. They seemed to make no sense at any time. Some creatures, like Spice, thought that humans were dangerous. But Spice couldn't see Daryl being a threat to anything, let alone trying to be. And Lena, who was even smaller than Daryl, surely she couldn't possibly be aggressive. None of them, the monster or the humans, made any attempt to interact with each other for hours. Lena was still coming to terms with the fact that a human had been vomited up onto her apartment floor. Daryl was wondering if Spice had been protecting him when it killed the man, or if the creature had some other personal reason. Spice, meanwhile, was wondering when the next something would happen, and a new adventure could begin. Hours turned into nights, and then days. Daryl and Lena seemed to be working out some sort of agreement, but Spice didn't fully understand. They both started to leave together, and stayed at the same boring places for hours on end, only to return to Lena's den. Spice didn't like that place. It was never fun or interesting. Most of the time, Daryl and Lena just sat in little chairs, typing on strange little boxes that they cared so much about. More so, Lena had started trying to ignore Spice. Even Daryl had started to say less to it. One day, the two humans became very upset over something that was being said in the small box they watched at night sometimes. Spice wasn't sure what they were being told, but they seemed very upset at the tiny man that lived in that box. And suddenly, now they were distressed over it. Lena insisted that throwing the body into the river was a bad idea from the beginning, and demanded that Daryl explain why he had to bring this mess to her home. Daryl, in turn, insisted that nothing was wrong. The bodies were so damaged by the water, and probably by Spice's mouth, that there was no evidence to be found. All the police knew, all anyone knew, was that 3 plastic bags were found in a riverbed with human remains. Daryl's words didn't seem to help Lena feel any better. She was shaking. Was she cold? Spice never felt cold, really. Maybe the temperature affected these humans differently than they would affect it. Maybe she was sad? Humans always seemed to feel better when they made physical contact with each other. So, Spice got an idea. It lifted a single, lumbering hand forward and gently placed it on top of Lena's head. Lena froze and muttered out a question. "It's petting me, isn't it?" Lena did stop shaking, but she still seemed rather upset. Daryl, meanwhile, couldn't help but laugh at the indignation. A few weeks after that, Daryl packed his few belongings into a cheap second-hand car he had bought. He had managed to get his own place, and had found a stable job working at the same accounting factory that Lena did. He'd made peace with the fact that there was, simply put, a monster that lived behind him. It had been there for 10 years. It had saved him from death, only to vomit up his would-be thief onto the floor of his best friend. After going through something like that, you learn to accept someone for what they are. Daryl loaded up everything into his car, and as he turned on the ignition, Lena asked if he had forgotten anything. He looked at her, and then at the large black shape standing in her doorway. He smiled and said no. They'll catch up. They always do.
You know, personally, I think a friend like Spice would be very good to have around. Although, I suppose, if you upset them, they could certainly chew you out. In any case, friends, until next time, donect itorum convenience.
spice.